Whenever we use a laptop or a desktop computer, odds are we have some other devices connected to it. Those are considered our peripherals. Our peripherals are any external equipment that sits outside of our laptop case or desktop case, and they plug into our computer or laptop. They usually add some sort of input, such as a mouse, a keyboard, or some sort of output, like a monitor showing an image or a printer printing out a piece of paper with information on it. Some common peripherals that we're going to cover in this video include monitors, printers, scanners, webcams, and speakers, USB, HDMI, and DisplayPort devices, wireless peripherals like Bluetooth and RF dongles, plug and play versus manual drivers from the device setup side, IP and web-based device setup, and lastly, we're going to cover printer setup basics as well as drivers. Let's start off by going over common peripherals first. Here is a monitor, and many of us use monitors, dual monitors, or even triple monitor setups in our day-to-day work. You've used a monitor before, and you know that they display text, images, videos, whatever's on a computer. They give us that visual output so we can actually see what we're doing. Then we have printers, and printers are often some of the most annoying devices to deal with just because there's so many different things that can go wrong. But printers create a simple physical copy of whatever we're printing out, whether it's a digital document, image, a website, no matter what we're printing out. A printer takes an input and turns it into a physical piece of paper or an output. We also have scanners, which are common on many printers nowadays. They allow us to actually input by taking paper or anything else that we're scanning and scan it into the computer as an output. From there, we also have webcams. That's actually what you're watching this through, is you're watching this through a camera that's set up exactly as a webcam. Webcams capture live video and images, and they're sent to the computer directly, and they're more of a form of an input. Lastly, we have speakers here, which convert signals into audio that you can actually hear. So all these different devices are pretty common. And one of the main things I want you to keep in mind as we go through this video is input versus output. Every device has some sort of input and it gives some sort of output. For example, webcams are more of an input device. We're adding some sort of image and it's being output onto the computer. The other way around is a monitor. A monitor is an output-based device. The computer is sending a message and that input from the computer is being translated to the monitor so we can see it from a visual perspective. All of these are just examples of input and outputs. Next up is our USB, HDMI, and DisplayPort devices. USB can connect almost anything, but HDMI and DisplayPort are more of a visual type of connection. Now, USB is known as Universal Serial Bus, and it's used to connect peripherals directly to a computer, a laptop, or another device for data transfer, mainly. You can use USB for a wide variety of different things. For example, you could have a USB mouse, you could have a USB webcam, you could have a USB keyboard, you could even the microphone that I'm talking to you through. This is based off of a USB connection. It has a USB-C running out of the back, and then physically it's plugged in to my laptop computer with a USB-C connection. Just keep in mind, USB-C is just a form of connection. It can be used for a wide variety of different things, storage devices, everything that we talked about. Almost all devices that sit outside of a computer are in some way USB compatible. Next up is HDMI, also known as high definition multimedia interface. This is one of the more common forms of connections that monitors and laptops use. It's just a way of connecting a monitor to a laptop. Even nowadays, gaming systems like an Xbox or a Nintendo Switch or a PS5, whatever you're using, is likely using HDMI to route a signal from a device to an output. For example, a gaming device to a TV, or from a laptop to a monitor, or a desktop computer to a monitor. From there, we have DisplayPort. DisplayPort is very similar to HDMI. It's just a different physical connection for actually transmitting video through some sort of medium. So for example, through a laptop to a monitor, through a desktop computer to a monitor, very, very similar to HDMI. It's just the actual cable and the connection is a different size, and it's a little bit of a different transfer rate and things like that. But for the Tech Plus, just be aware HDMI and DisplayPort are two different forms of video connection. Next up is wireless peripherals. Wireless peripherals are essentially wireless technology that can be used to connect our different devices directly to a computer, a laptop, or any other device. So for example, on Bluetooth, on our phones, we can use our phones and we can connect our phone directly to something like a pair of AirPods. So for example, we have these AirPods. I would go on my phone, I would turn on Bluetooth, and then I would physically connect to these AirPods. So that's one way that we can use Bluetooth. There's many, many different use cases for Bluetooth. Most commonly though, nowadays, we see that people are using Bluetooth on their phone mainly, and it can be still used on a laptop or desktop computer. Sometimes with a desktop computer though, the Bluetooth function doesn't come natively, so you might need to install some sort of adapter or some sort of expansion card directly onto the motherboard to get Bluetooth functionality. But just understand, Bluetooth is a short-range wireless technology that can be used to connect a wide variety of devices. Also keyboards, mice, phones, headphones, everything that we talked about that uses Bluetooth, and its effective range is usually around 20 to 30 feet or around 10 or so meters. Next up is an RF dongle or a wireless dongle. This is just a small USB device that has a receiver on it, and it plugs directly into your computer or laptop or other device, and it can connect things like keyboards, gaming devices, mouse, whatever you're looking to connect. RF dongles make things very, very easy because all you really need to do is plug in a little dongle. Actually, I have one here for my mouse that I'll show you, and this is plugged directly into my laptop. So you can see here, this is a very, very small, this would USB dongle, and or rather RF dongle or USB dongle. It's kind of hard for the camera to pick it up there, but this plugs directly into my laptop, and this is what allows me to use my mouse on my laptop without having to enable anything like Bluetooth or have a bunch of wires around. So those are Bluetooth connection and RF dongles or RF USBs. From there, we have wired and wireless. So we have wired peripherals and we have wireless peripherals. You should really be familiar with these by now, but our wired peripherals, it's just something that's wired. So it actually has a wire running to it. For example, a wired keyboard would have a wire running from the keyboard, and you would actually have to physically route that wire and plug that wire into your laptop or your computer or your other device. Same thing with a wired mouse. These are not really as common today. These were very, very common many years ago, but many times people are switching over to wireless. It's just a lot more simple. It clears up clutter, and honestly, wireless devices nowadays function very, very, very good, and most computers nowadays have support for wireless types of peripherals. Next up is plug and play versus manual drivers. So drivers are essentially a piece of software that allow our physical devices that are connected to our laptop or desktop computer, whatever we're using, to actually function. So for example, if we have a mouse, going back to the mouse example earlier, I have this mouse here. I have it and it's connected through that RF dongle I just showed you. And now my computer natively recognizes this mouse. So when I plug in that USB dongle, I turn this mouse on, boom, I can use it right away. But sometimes, especially for printers, for more specialized devices, you need to go out and actually download or install a driver manually. That means that some devices are what's known as plug and play here, as we're showing here on screen. They're plug and play, and some devices are manual. So if something's plug and play, if it's a plug and play driver, that means that your device automatically has the driver or it's automatically installed. You don't need to do anything on your end. But for a manual driver, it requires that you or someone in the IT department download and install a piece of software or a driver manually in order for that device to work or to function properly. Plug and play drivers or plug and play devices are very simple. They don't require any setup. They work immediately after you plug in the device, and they often use built-in or default system drivers. On the other hand, again, more specialized devices need manual drivers. So you have to go out there, look up the actual driver for that device on the manufacturer's website, download it, install it, probably restart a computer, and then you would have that device driver, and then that device would be able to function. I would say about 90% of devices nowadays are plug and play, and they have plug and play drivers. So plug and play drivers, whatever you want to call it, a plug and play device or a plug and play driver lets you start using it instantly. Our manual drivers need installs. They also often do mess up, and they often need updates. And with the manual drivers, it's usually a lot more of a headache. It does give you more control over the driver settings, but in my opinion, it's just too much of a headache, which is why I really, really love plug and play devices that have plug and play drivers versus having to do manual drivers on more specialized or manual devices. From here, we have IP and web-based device setup. So you can use IP and web-based setup for managing certain devices. For example, a router or a modem or something at home, you might need to go out and visit a local IP address or go onto their settings on your laptop to actually configure that device. Same thing with printers. Not as common with cameras unless they're more IP address based, for example, security cameras, but it's really, really common with printers and routers. These are the two most common types of web or IP-based device setups. Additionally, with these setups, you can change security passwords and settings. You can update firmware, check out certain device settings and things like that. But for the most part, these are a little bit more intricate than simple plug and play or even simple driver-based devices. These IP and web-based can be pretty complex if you don't know what you're doing. The cons to these are it does take quite a bit of management and support and troubleshooting. While it can save time, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially if you're not very tech savvy. So IP and web-based device setups, while they are important and common in printers and routers, usually outside of that, they're not commonly used. Now let's go into printers. Printers are simple. They take an input from a computer or another device and they turn it into an output, something on a piece of paper that gets printed out for you to have in the real world and that you can physically see. Printers usually also have scanners where they can scan a page, which is the input, and then they can output it to the computer as an image file on the computer or a file or PDF in general. Let's look at the types of printers here. The first type is inkjet. This is a very, very common type of printer, especially for consumers. It uses liquid ink. It's best for photo and color printing, and it's common in homes or small businesses, and it's got a very low upfront cost. Usually they can be had around $50 to $150 US, and they have a higher ink cost. So they have the low upfront cost, but they're pretty expensive to use in the long run just because the ink is pricey. From there, we have laser printers. You've definitely seen something like this if you've worked in an office setting, and they're toner based. They're more common in businesses and offices, and they're used for very fast printing, high volume of material, so a lot of pages in one day. They also usually offer advanced features like duplex printing or being able to print on both sides of the paper, and they have a very high upfront cost, high maintenance costs, but usually lower toner costs. So if you get a question about photos and color printing, it's more than likely going to be inkjet. If you get something more office based, you're probably looking at a laser printer. Next up is thermal printers here, and these are simple. They're just used for receipts and labels. You've probably seen one of these older thermal printers. They're especially common in banking settings as well. From here, the last printer we have is known as an impact printer. This is just a legacy and older printer. You don't really need to know this one as much. I would focus on understanding inkjet, laser, and thermal, and they're all relatively simple. Just remember inkjet, common with consumers, good for photos and color printing. Laser is common in offices, especially with duplex printing, and thermal is common with receipts and labels. Thermal is mainly used in like retail stores and things like that. Next up is printer setup basics, drivers, and software. So printer setup is essentially connecting a printer to whatever device you need to print through. Printer setup can include setting up a printer through a USB cable, through a network cable, or through something like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. Normally, I like to set my printers up with USB cables because sometimes the wireless can be hit or miss, and oftentimes it's just easier to buy a $5 USB cable and never have to worry about any sort of wireless issues. Printers are pretty notorious for the problems that they bring, so they often require quite a bit of troubleshooting. In terms of drivers, some printers do require manual installation drivers, some are plug and play. It really depends on the brand of printer you're using and what type of device you're using. So sometimes your computer, your laptop will automatically detect and be able to print quickly. Sometimes you got to go out there and download a specialty manufacturer software, install it, and then try and print from there. This is another reason why printers can be a pain. Oftentimes these drivers, if they get messed up, they can completely destroy printing. They can ruin the connection. It's a hassle to deal with. So why is this important? Well, making sure that you properly set up your printer is going to save you a lot of trouble in the long term, and it's going to ensure that you have that consistent connection and you can print when you need to print. I can't tell you the amount of times I've had issues with printers, both in my own personal life, just trying to get something printed out, and both in an office setting when I was doing more troubleshooting on the help desk side of things. So keep that in mind. Printers can be quite a pain. Additionally, printers won't work properly without drivers or software. So if you're ever troubleshooting things, one of the first places that you should look after you obviously power down the printer and ensure a good physical connection is being made is looking at the drivers. So printers have a lot of different issues that come up in terms of troubleshooting. But again, one of the first places you can start, check the physical connection, make sure it's on USB or on a network cable, make sure that it's obviously powered on. And then from there, I would be checking things like toner or ink, checking paper, that things aren't jammed. And oftentimes printers actually have displays where it'll tell you if there's a certain error. And then from there, looking at drivers would probably be the final step in terms of resolving some of the more complex printer issues. And that's it for this video. We covered a wide variety of topics about peripherals and external devices, how we can set them up, what type of drivers they need versus manual and plug and play, and we even talked about printer setup as well.